Some people have said that this is hypocrisy and they feel betrayed. What do you have to say to them? Hello and welcome to another interview. Today I am at the Parliament joined by a very special guest, an MP and the current spokesperson for the People's Party, Mr. Parit Wacharasindhu. Mr. Spokesperson, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So today we are meeting just ahead of the election, and since you're currently the spokesperson, I would like to talk to you about some of the current issues that the country is facing ahead of the election so that voters can have an idea of the platform that you're running on. You left the Democrats after they formed a government coalition with a military-backed party, and this was encouraging to a lot of people. It helped you to launch your current platform, I would say. And however, recently, your party voted to elect a minority government with similar principles. Some people have said that this is hypocrisy and they feel betrayed. What do you have to say to them?
So I think we have to reiterate that the decision for us to enter into an MOA with the current minority government is based on our attempt to get two things done, which has not been done beforehand. The first is to get Parliament dissolved as quickly as possible. Ever since the crisis between Thailand and Cambodia peaked with the audio clip between the former Prime Minister Pathongtan and the Cambodian leader Hun Sen, we have since then been calling each day for a dissolution of the parliament because we felt that what Thailand needed was a government that is stable enough, legitimate enough, and has enough potential to solve some of the most complicated issues facing our country. And we don't feel that any government that comes out of this current parliamentary setup will be able to satisfy those requirements. So we feel that a government that can truly solve those issues is one that is born out of the new parliament, which is elected by the people. So ever since that clip came out, we've been calling for a dissolution of parliament. But every day our calls were not answered. So when eventually the Prime Minister was removed from office by the court, we wanted to use the new PM selection process to try and initiate a lead up to a dissolution as quickly as possible. The second thing that we tried to use the MOA for is to finally kickstart the process towards the drafting of a new constitution. We see that the current constitution that we have is undemocratic by global standards. It makes the power of the people weak. It makes a lot of political institutions unaccountable to the people. And we feel a solution is to get a new version of the constitution. But to do that, we need to first kickstart a process that will eventually lead up to a referendum to ask the Thai people if they want a new constitution or not. So those were the two reasons or the two objectives as to why we decided to draft our MOA arrangement to support a prime minister who would be willing to get those two things done. Eventually that became Kun Anutin, but the offer that was on the table was open to both PM candidates at the time.
But you guys voted for Anutin.
Yes, we voted more on a mathematical reason rather than ideological one. To be completely frank with you, whichever we decided to vote was not because we felt our ideology is aligned to them. We simply wanted the government to get in, dissolve parliament, as well as kickstart the process of drafting a new constitution. The reason why we eventually voted for Anutin rather than Chai Kasem from Thai Party is simply because of mathematics. Because at the time, what we wanted to ensure was that the government that eventually came into power remains a minority government. Because if they remain a minority government, it means that we as the opposition leader could combine with the other opposition parties to topple the government if they were to break their promise. At the time, our parliament has 500 MPs. Kun Chai Kasem from Thai was able to compile about 200 plus MPs, whereas Kun Anutin at the time was about 140 plus MPs. So mathematically, we felt that it was the safer option to go with Anutin because the probability of him, once he got into power, increasing the number of MPs to cross-side and join his government, to make his government a majority government is less likely than the Chai Kasem scenario, simply based on mathematics.
Based on the last month, it's been about a month since that vote took place.
Yep.
Would you do it again, or do you regret this decision at all?
We made a difficult decision. We are still trying our best to make sure that the objectives of that difficult decision is met. I think that is twofold. On the one hand, we need to make sure that the two key conditions that I mentioned, which is the dissolution of parliament and the kickstarting of the new constitution, happen. But the second thing that we need to also do is our role as the opposition party, which is to scrutinize and challenge and ask questions on the government to make sure that they don't make any policy decisions, especially ones with a long-lasting effect that would not be to the benefit of the Thai people.
So do you stand by your decision?
I think we have made the decision. It was a difficult one. Now it's our responsibility to make sure that the benefits that we had hoped from the decision would be met.
Okay, so since the election of the minority government, the country has fallen further into kind of daily chaos. There's issues of public trust, there's scandals that seem to be on the rise. Do you feel at all responsible for the current situation?
I feel we need to, whatever government gets into power, we have been clear that we will be in opposition. So our duty, regardless of how we voted or whoever we voted for, we need to do our best to scrutinize the government's work and make sure that their policies don't affect the Thai people. I think one of the main issues that we feel the government has been underperforming or has not taken enough action to solve for the Thai people is on the scam centers. To be honest, I am not sure if the situation would look that different had we voted for Chai Kasem. So it could be that this issue is an issue that exists regardless of who we voted in. But I think regardless of who the government is, we have been trying to call for stronger action on this issue. A couple of weeks ago, or a few days ago, the government came out with a big event where there was a signing of an MOU between different government units. I think for me, that simply just highlights the inefficiency of this current government, because to get different government units to work together, you don't need an MOU. It's like if you were a company, to get different departments of the same company working together, you don't need an MOU. An MOU is supposed to be a mechanism to get external parties, whether private sector organizations or governments in other countries, to work together with you. So the fact that they went with this elaborate event to simply sign MOU between different units of government, I think just shows a lack of efficiency. And on the transparency, we have since been calling, since the very first day of this government, that some members of the cabinet have allegations that they are tied to networks that are allegedly tied to scam centers. Since then, some of the members of the cabinet that satisfy those requirements are still currently in the cabinet. The deputy minister resigned, but there are still other members of the cabinet, including the deputy prime minister, who's still in his role. So that I think for me is what we have been criticizing this government on, their ineffectiveness and transparency issues regarding scam centers.
Okay. So aside from opposing this government and everything that it's doing, how do you plan to directly address the issue of voter trust?
I think that question is twofold. The first part is what happens over the next 3 or 4 months before the dissolution. I think we've been very clear that we wanted to remain in opposition so that we can use all parliamentary mechanisms to hold the government to account. And of course, the most powerful weapon that we can use is the no confidence motion, which we have publicly stated that if the government were to either break our MOA promises on the constitution or on dissolution, or if they were to press ahead with certain policies or omit certain policies that lead to heavy damage to the Thai people, then we would be open to using that no confidence motion to scrutinize the government. The first part of regaining that trust is showing our effectiveness as an opposition party, holding the government to account, and using our MPs to pressure the government into changing their policies for the benefit of the Thai people. The second part, I think, will come at the general election, whether we as a party can present a vision for the future of Thailand that gives people confidence that it will lead to the structural changes that we had been campaigning ever since the last election, and we want an opportunity to finally come in and deliver.
Okay, so there is a pretty substantial rumor that either the People's Party or the Thai Party, or maybe both, will use a no confidence motion to topple the government. What do you have to say about this?
So our conditions are clear. We have stated 3 conditions. The first one is that if the government does not dissolve parliament by the 31st of January, it would mean that they have overstayed their 4-month arrangement, and then we would use the no confidence motion on the 1st of February. The second condition is that if they don't get the constitutional amendment bill passed through the three stages of parliament by the end of December or the end of this year, then we would also file no confidence motion. And if you work that backwards, if they were to get the amendment passed through the third reading, it means that they have to open up an extraordinary parliamentary meeting at the beginning of December to at least consider the amendment bill in the second reading. So by the beginning of December, we will have a better picture on whether the government will hold its promise in getting this bill passed by the three stages of parliament by the end of December. And then the third condition is that on top of the first two conditions, if the government were to press ahead with policies or omit certain policies that would heavily damage the people, whether on scam centers or whether on the economy or whether on allegations of corruption, then we also retain the right to file a no confidence debate. So those are our three conditions.
So a lot of voters actually expected the People's Party to file a no confidence motion following interference in the Khalkhalong case, and nothing happened. Why?
So I think two parts to that question. In the general question first, I think the people are clear that the reason that we decided to enter into this MOA arrangement is to get not just the dissolution of parliament, but to also get progress on the constitution. And that is based on what we believe to be to the benefit of the Thai people, so that they can get a political system that works for them. So in that sense, we do want this MOA to work out in the sense that the government successfully pushes ahead and makes sure that there is a referendum on the constitution on the same date as the general election. But on the other hand, I know that in order to get that across, it will take up to 4 months in the MOA. And we also understand that that cannot be at the expense of irreversible damage that happens to the Thai people. So I think for us, it's a matter of balancing on these two components and then arriving at a decision on the no confidence motion. I think it was clear from the beginning that it was not the case that we would file a no confidence motion on the first day that the government steps in, because otherwise we would have just called for dissolution of parliament as one or as the only condition, rather than also tying it to the constitutional amendment.
I mean, it seems that daily people are pointing out that there's ethical violations happening in this government, and I every day see people saying, why are you not already filing no confidence motions? I don't think that the message that you're sending is what the people are receiving every day.
Sure. I think on the Khalkhalong case, we need to understand that there are different levels of parliamentary mechanisms that we can use. Of course, the most powerful one is the no confidence motion, which would be to the objective of actually changing the government or pressuring a dissolution. But on other parliamentary mechanisms, we have used that to scrutinize specifically the Khalkhalong case. I mean, personally, I was one of the MPs who made speeches at the policy statement on this and have called for the department within the Ministry of Transport to press ahead with filing cases against certain plots of land that we know belong to people related to the people in government or the party in government. So far, they have filed those charges, but that does not mean that we are at ease. We still have to monitor whether there are infiltrations of that justice process or not. And if there were to be severe infiltrations in that justice process, then we would definitely use that as one important piece of information to decide on whether we file a no confidence motion or not. We do think that we need to find the right balance between making sure that our MOA our MOA conditions are met and making sure that the people that benefit from that, while also pressuring the government to not infiltrate the justice process or press ahead with anything that may result in corruption. But we have a lot of parliamentary mechanisms that we can use to scrutinize government beyond just the no confidence motion.
Kun Thanathorn is the de facto leader of the progressive movement. He's been involved in every version of the People's Party, and voters have expressed distrust and displeasure with this. I want to know, do you think that real progress and social justice can be achieved under the guidance of a billionaire?
I believe that the People's Party is an institution that is not tied to one particular person. And I also believe that a person's ideas and policy proposals are not related to his or her background. That the People's Party is a platform that will try and push through changes to the country that will bring out, that will make sure that our economy is more competitive, is more fair, make sure that our political system is democratic, make sure that our justice system is up to standard, make sure that our society is less unequal. So I think regardless of what came before from previous parties or who is involved with which party, I think the party is bigger than any person.
So are you saying that he's not the ideological leader of the party?
I'm saying that a lot of his ideas, of course, are picked up by the party because the party, I don't think we've hidden from the fact that we are a third reincarnation of the Future Forward Party where he was the leader. I'm saying two things. One is I'm saying the party is bigger than any person. And the second thing I'm saying is that I think a person's ideas and policy proposals are independent of his or her background. So even if you were to come from a certain background, I think you have the right to present and form policy ideas that may not necessarily be in line with what people would expect you to form.
Charges are pending against dozens of members of the People's Party. What is your plan if they are convicted and banned from politics?
So I think we are doing two things in parallel. The first is we are trying our best to prove our innocence. We believe that what our 44 MPs and former MPs had done is not anything that is wrong, not anything that is unconstitutional, and not anything that justifies them being banned from office. So that is something which we are trying our best to prove, both to the justice system as well as to the general public. The second thing in parallel we're doing as well is to make sure that we have backup plans if the worst case were to happen. And coming back to my principle, we are trying to build a party that is bigger than any one person. So if the worst were to happen, of course, we regret not having them be able to run for office and translate their abilities and their potential into meaningful actions in parliament. But the party has to go on and has to continue pushing our ideas. In one sentence, we are fighting for the best but preparing for the worst.
So your former party, the Democrats, are now kind of back and they are targeting the same electorate as the People's Party at the moment, younger voters, even younger membership. So for you, do you see yourself being able to work with the Democrat Party, considering what you said before? Not returning necessarily or whatever, but can you work with them?
It's not just the Democrat Party that is trying to prepare themselves for the general election. So right now, I think every party is trying to prepare themselves for the general election. So therefore, every voter is being approached by every party to try and present their case to them as to why he or she should vote for that party. So in that sense, every party is our competitor, but competition is not a bad thing because competition drives policy innovation. It makes every party work that little bit harder to think about the solutions that can solve the people's problem. So in that sense, we welcome competition, not just from any one party, but from every party. Secondly, when you ask, can we work with any one specific party or not? I think when you say working with, that comes at two levels. The first is joining a coalition government. Right now, I think what we're trying to tell the public or convince the public is that if they believe that the future of Thailand that the People's Party is presenting and trying to drive the country towards is one that you feel will make your lives better, then just choose our party and vote for our party overwhelmingly to make sure that we have more than 250 MPs, and therefore we don't have to get ourselves into a situation where we have to choose which specific party we need to go into a coalition with to have more than 250 MPs. Secondly, if you talk about a more loose definition of working together, I think we have proven in the past that we leave with our issues and our platforms. Let's say we come up with a certain draft bill on a certain issue, we will do our best to convince other parties to support it as well. So I think provided the platform is common, provided on that specific issue we have common ideas, then we can work together with any party.
Would you form a coalition with them? Would you join a coalition with the Democrats?
If we are able to get more than 250 MPs, which I don't think is something which is impossible, if we present our case right, and if we are able to convince the people, then that question may be a question that doesn't need to be asked at all. But if we were to get to a stage where we have to think about joining coalition with any party, I think we will treat all parties equally based on how much their ideologies align with us and how much their policies overlap with us.
Politicians are promising to crack down on scams, but they actually seem to somehow just be getting worse. Do you think that current elected officials are involved in scam networks?
I think the longer the time goes on, where people keep asking that question, the more convinced they will be that there are people high up in government that are tied to this network. Because I think what the people are seeing right now is a lack of intensity in solving this issue. Domestically, as I had mentioned, what we wanted to see is the intensity in tracking down, intercepting, seizing assets, as well as at least equaling the intensity that we see from other governments around the world in cracking down this issue. But what we have seen so far are very light touch measures, such as setting up committees, holding MOU signing ceremonies. So I think on the one hand, we see lack of intensity in the domestic space. Secondly, we also feel that the government has not been proactive enough in trying to get international collaboration on this issue. This issue of scam centers is an issue that doesn't just affect Thai citizens, but it affects citizens across the world. And it's actually an issue where the world needs Thailand to be on board. Because geographically, we are right in the center between two countries or two borders that supposedly are the center of a lot of the, or home to a lot of the scam centers. The world desperately needs our help. But in the contrary, our government has been not proactive enough in trying to get that international collaboration. At the latest ASEAN meeting, we saw the Prime Minister mention in the meeting that he wanted Thailand to be the host in terms of solving this issue. But it was very unclear what exact tangible mechanisms he offered for other countries to connect with Thailand, to share resources, to share information, and actually crack down on this issue. It seemed to be more of lip service than anything that is tangible. So right now, it's unclear why the government is not being intense enough on solving this issue. But I think the longer it goes on like this, the more people will come to the conclusion that the reason for that lack of intensity is because there's a conflict of interest and that there are people in government that are tied to these scam centers.
So do you think there's people in the government that are tied to this?
We have been clear that there are members of cabinet, including the Deputy Prime Minister, who we believe have affiliations with people who have been accused of being tied to scam centers. And we have quite clearly called upon the Prime Minister to dismiss that Deputy Prime Minister out of the cabinet. So far, that call has not been answered. In addition, we also saw an MP from that Deputy Prime Minister's party who is now being accused or charged with his involvement with online betting, which are closely tied to scams. So I think the accusation and the questions are being asked, but right now the government and the Prime Minister is not answering them.
Okay, so what is your specific plan for fighting the transnational scams?
On the domestic front, I already mentioned we need to up the intensity. But on the international space, I believe that we can actually use the ASEAN mechanism to be more proactive in pushing this issue. So tangibly, we saw that there is a 1997 ASEAN declaration which talks about the possibility of opening up a center on ASEAN Center on Transnational Crime. Right? That was signed in 1997. Almost 30 years on, that center has not been established. So for me, it's the right time for Thailand to take a leading role in calling out to ASEAN members in implementing that idea in the declaration 30 years ago and finally setting up that ASEAN Center in Thailand. That would enable for different countries across the region to actually share information and resources in solving this issue. Because we cannot solve this issue alone without international collaboration. Because if the scam centers that are affecting the Thai people are not based in Thailand, but are based in other countries, we need collaboration between different countries on the prosecution process. If we want to intercept and seize assets that are tied to scam centers that are transferred across the country, we also need collaboration on technology. We also need standardization on money laundering standards as well. Or even if we want to make sure that adverts that are tied to online scams, that are tricking Thai people and people around the world every day, are taken down from social media platforms. We also need collaboration with social media platforms that are not based in Thailand. So in that sense, we need this international collaboration. I think if we can take a leading role in ASEAN, having that ASEAN setup will help increase our bargaining power and make our voice louder.
There's currently a border conflict between Thailand and Cambodia. How do you feel about the current government's response to that situation?
The first thing is I think if we want to solve this conflict, I think our target is to return normalcy to the Thai people, to ensure that Thai people, especially in the borders, can live in a safe environment again. I think that is the top priority. Now the question is, what is the root cause of this conflict? I believe that the root cause of this conflict is not the Cambodian people, but the Cambodian leadership, right? That is, for whatever purposes, escalating this conflict. So if we believe my hypothesis that the root cause lies in the Cambodian leadership, then what we need to do is to make sure that we cut off the income that is feeding the Cambodian leadership and cut off the Cambodian leadership's legitimacy in the world stage. And one thing that will help solve those two goals in parallel is the scam centers. Because if we believe that the scam centers right now are helping to increase the income of influential people that are tied to the Cambodian leadership, cracking down on this will make sure that we remove an important source of their income. And secondly, because as I mentioned, the scam issue is an issue that is troubling people across the whole world. If it's proven that these scam centers are linked to the Cambodian leadership, it also reduces their legitimacy on the world stage. The bullet that will help solve this issue is cracking down on the scam centers. The second part, if you ask me, the government's handling of this issue, apart from that, the inefficiency on that respect, we feel that the government has been making decisions on this conflict based on political calculations rather than national interests. One clear example that I already criticized the government for in Parliament is this decision to hold a referendum on abolishing MOU 43 to 44. Now, we understand that referendum is part of the democratic process to make important decisions in any country. But I think if this referendum proposal is something which the government has carefully planned for, rather than just introducing it to try and drive up political support, they should be able to answer two questions that I asked last month that they haven't been able to answer. The first question is, how do they plan to hold a referendum and ensure that the people who is going to go in to vote can get access to information to make that decision? Because on the one hand, we want people to get access to well-rounded information so that they can make an informed choice in the ballot. But on the other hand, we know that a lot of information that they will need are information regarding what would give Thailand an advantage or disadvantage in the global stage, which is precisely the information that affects our national security, and we probably don't want it to be shared with the Cambodian leadership. So the question is, how is the government planning to prepare for a referendum and enable the people to get access to the information that is required for them to make an informed decision? The second question that they have not answered is that if the people went into the ballot and voted to abolish or cancel MOU 43 and 44, does the government have a new bilateral mechanism in place or in mind to replace these MOUs? Or is their solution to not have any MOUs or bilateral mechanism in place at all? These are two very basic questions that the government should be able to answer if they had thought up this policy in a careful manner. But if they introduce this policy simply for populist motivations, then I think it's not to the interests of the country as a whole.
Do you think that there is a potentially negative impact on the Prime Minister's response being to kind of condemn the deal that was made under Trump's watch?
With the latest event that happened, I think the Prime Minister's reaction epitomized the problem that I said, which is I think he thinks too much about political calculations rather than what is in the interest of the country. I think what he should have done are three things. One is as soon as the event happened, he should have called up both President Trump as well as the ASEAN chair to inform those two leaders that Cambodia has violated the treaty with the issue of landmines. But he wasn't proactive enough in doing that, which meant that it took a couple of days until the two leaders eventually became aware and made statements on this issue. So it was a lost opportunity for Thailand and the Thai government to get to Trump and the ASEAN chair first to inform them that Thailand had been trying to abide by this treaty, but it was Cambodia and the related landmines that violated this peace treaty. The second thing that we felt that the government should have done is try and use certain negotiating power to basically reduce Cambodia's legitimacy in the world stage. So I think it was a perfect time for the Thai government to convince the global stage and the global leaders that this may have been a tactic by the Cambodian government to distract people from the scam centers, which is the root cause of the issue. So those are two examples of measures that we felt the government should have done, the Prime Minister should have done, and he didn't do.
The economy is in a state of near crisis. The household debt to GDP ratio is about 90%. The cost of living has surged and the wealth gap has widened. Most people are just surviving and are worried about the future. What is your plan to revive the economy?
So the economy is definitely in a crisis. What we at the party believe is that in order to fix the economy, any short-term economic stimulus is not going to cut it. We are not opposed to short-term economic stimulus. We know that some may be needed to at least alleviate the imminent issue, but to fix the economy in the long run and to make sure that Thais can have a good quality of life, we don't think that simply a short-term economic stimulus will cut it. Right? So I think there are two priorities that we want to move Thailand towards. The first one is how do we make Thailand competitive? And when you talk to foreign investors, what we notice is that what they often mention, which makes Thailand less competitive than other countries, is not just a matter of tax incentives, right? But it's more on the skills of our workforce and on the corruption that's involved and increase the costs of doing business here. So on that first problem, I think that's where our priorities lie. So how we can upskill and reskill our workforce and eliminate corruption to make sure that our economy is more competitive. The second priority is how do we solve inequality? And what worries us is that we see that a lot of trends that are currently coming in, whether technology that may disrupt the way we work, whether the aging society issue that is affecting Thailand, or whether even the global climate change that is affecting people in the low income households more so than the people in the higher income households, it's widening the inequality gap. In this increasingly uncertain environment, what we believe is necessary is for Thailand to have a stronger welfare state system, to provide a better safety net for all Thai people, to make sure that whatever crisis comes, at least they have a minimum quality of life that the state is able to provide for them. That of course requires investment. It requires a new allocation of our budget, but that is what we want to press ahead if we are to get in government.
China is the most consequential world power of our time. However, currently, most politicians have not presented strategies or actual action plans for how Thailand will engage with them. What is your strategy to engage Thailand and China while also protecting national security or national interests such as economic independence?
I think what is facing our country as a challenge is not just one particular country, but it's this whole new geopolitical space, especially the rivalry and the tension between the US and China. And I think, in fact, given the latest events related to President Trump's tariffs, I think it becomes clearer to the Thai public now how geopolitical tensions can affect the livelihoods of the Thai people. So I think what you might see in this upcoming election is an election where foreign policy will gather more interest than ever before. I think what we have used as a principle for designing our foreign policy is that in this geopolitical tension, we believe that our foreign policy should not be pro-US or pro-China, but pro-Thailand. So we use our domestic interests as the guideline or as the main criteria for making our foreign policy decisions. Of course, prioritizing domestic interests does not mean that we cut off from the world, but it's about how do we use our foreign policy to bring benefits to the Thai people. To put that more concretely, we see that Thailand should present itself as a middle power that does at least three things. Number one is we want to be a middle power that is issue-based and not a small power that is bloc-based, in the sense that we would not act as a small country that would side with one of the two superpowers all the time, but we put our interests and our issues and our priorities as the main decision criteria in terms of which other countries we collaborate with. So for example, if we want to prioritize or make collaboration on tourism, then that's something which we in China have to have a conversation on, because we saw that the decline in Chinese tourists have heavily affected our tourism industry. If we were to go and talk to the US, things like talking about technology transfer, digital governance are certain areas that we believe that we have shared interests with the US on. So in that sense, our foreign policy will be issue-based and not bloc-based. Or even if there's an issue which we believe that both the US and China will be happy to collaborate with Thailand on, such as the crackdown of scam centers, then that is something which we can press ahead as well. I don't know when was the last time that the US leader and the Chinese leader met in Thailand, but I believe that if there were to be an issue which we can use to invite the leaders of the two superpowers to come and have a discussion on how to solve an issue on, it would be the issue of cracking down scam centers. So that's the first one. The second one is, I think Thailand as a middle power needs to position itself as a rule shaper, not just a rule taker. Right? So I think sticking to our principles of democracy, human rights, and transparency are important, because on the one hand, it signals to the rest of the world what we stand for. It makes sure that they know if they were to talk to us, what do we prioritize, what do we give importance to. But on the other hand, it also means that what we are expecting from the world is in line with what the domestic people are expecting from us as well. If we don't talk about human rights and transparency in the global stage, then the people within our country will ask as well whether we really care about human rights and transparency in the domestic space. So I think making sure that our principles in the global stage and our principle in the domestic space are in line is important. And then the third and final position that I think we should take as a middle power is to not be forced to choose between US and China, but to look beyond US and China. So I think in this geopolitical space, we cannot just rely on two superpowers, but we need to see kind of which other countries, which other geographical areas that we can collaborate on different issues.
You've pushed hard for constitutional reform, which is a pretty complex issue. Very simply, what is wrong with the current Thai constitution?
I mean, the current Thai constitution, in a nutshell, makes the people's power weak. It's not democratic by global standards. And I think it's not a coincidence that we saw three problems become worse under this current constitution. The first is we've seen worsening democracy, at least related to the accountability of political institutions. If you look at our democracy index since the first election under this constitution in 2019, we've seen that our score on the functioning of our political institutions have declined. And part of that is because this constitution has expanded the powers of many unelected organizations that can contradict and contravene the will of the people that's expressed through the ballot box. Right now, you could even say that the people who have a final say on what laws can be amended, what policies can be pushed ahead, or even what type of constitution drafting assembly can be designed are not the people in parliament or the people in government, but are the 9 justices in the constitutional court. The second problem that we saw have gotten worse under this constitution is on policy innovation. Right? If you go back 20 years, things like universal healthcare coverage was seen as a success by all parties in the country and is lauded on the international stage. But under this constitution, I don't think we've seen any clear policy innovations that have come out of governments over the past few years. And I think part of that is because the mechanisms that are designed under this constitution have incentivized the government to survive rather than to innovate. Since this constitution has been in place, the party that came first in the election has never been in government. Since the last election in 2023, we've had 3 prime ministers, 2 removed by the constitutional court. So with this setup where elected governments may not represent the will of the people that's expressed through the ballot box, and within this setup where elected prime ministers may be removed from office without the consent of the electorate, then I think we are designing a system that will result in governments being incentivized to think about survival rather than come up with innovative policies that will require time to implement or require some risk-taking. And the third and final issue is on corruption. We've seen that our transparency score in the Corruption Perception Index has worsened under this constitution, even though supporters of this constitution like to claim that this constitution helps to eradicate corruption. To give you a clear picture, our transparency score is now as low as Nepal, who have recently just undergone or underseen a mass protest precisely on corruption. And I think part of this is because our constitution has designed organizations that are expected to take a leading role in tackling corruption. For example, the Electoral Commission, the National Anti-Corruption Commission, the State Audit, who themselves are unaccountable. Regardless of how well they perform, the people have very little say in how to hold them into account. The right that they used to have in gathering signatures to file complaints that could lead to the removal of the people in these organizations have been removed from the current constitution. So that's what's happened under this constitution. And we believe that if we want to make our democracy stronger, our policies more innovative, and our country more transparent, we need to amend this constitution.
The progressive movement has always taken a strong anti-corruption stance, and nowadays, more than ever, people say that corruption seems to be at its peak or like worse than ever. Aside from the Constitution, the issues of the Constitution that you've just mentioned, why is that?
We have been ineffective at tackling corruption. And I think one proposal we have that we believe will help make us better tackle corruption is to shift from viewing corruption as simply from an ethical lens to viewing it from an economic lens as well. In the past, I think previous governments have viewed corruption simply from an ethical lens. So they believe that to tackle corruption, to eradicate corruption, what they need to do is to educate and turn people into good people that would never commit corruption. Now, of course, that is a good target to have, but it's one that is very unrealistic, because what we see is that people are human beings, and sometimes we see human beings being tempted to perform bad things and to commit cases of corruption. Even people who have had no corruption record, when they get into power, can sometimes be tempted into making corruption. So I think it's an unrealistic aim to make everyone good people from an ethical point of view and refrain themselves from committing corruption. So I think a more effective way is to view it from an economic angle and think about how do we design a system that can eradicate corruption, even if people were incentivized to commit corruption.
Are people incentivizing you to commit corruption?
No, but I think people are sometimes, when they get into power, are tempted to make corruption for their own self-benefit. So what does it mean by using an economic approach? To tackle corruption, I think you can do three things. One is you reduce the benefit of corruption. A lot of times right now, if you talk to people in the private sector, especially businesses, with this whole system where they have to get so many permits to perform even one or two tasks, they sometimes pay bribes in order to get that convenience. So if we streamline the permit process to make sure that it becomes less cumbersome for businesses, then the need that businesses may feel in terms of paying bribes are gone. So that's what I mean by reducing the benefit of corruption. Second is you need to increase the cost of corruption. You need to make sure that if someone were to commit corruption, they will realistically not be left unpunished. And I think one very important mechanism that can make that happen is open data. Right now, people's access to data and information where they can detect corruption can sometimes be limited. For example, by law, every politician needs to submit their asset statement. I need to submit when I became an MP how much assets I have. And then once I leave, I need to submit again to see if my assets have risen exponentially, even though it doesn't match with my income. If you ask the relevant authorities right now whether that information is open to the public, they will tell you yes. But realistically, that information is only available for people to access online for 180 days. If it's outside that 180-day window, you have to go to the National Anti-Corruption Commission to ask for the paperwork physically. And even within that 180-day time frame where it's open online, it's a scanned picture that you cannot, that is not machine readable, and you cannot search for information on. So it makes it very difficult to access and analyze this type of information. So what we're calling for is open data by default, which means that all public data should be open by default to the public unless the relevant authorities have a clear and convincing reason as to why opening it up may affect national security. And we also mean by open data to also include certain data standards to make sure that data can be analyzed. So it's not open data in the sense that we have scanned photos of politician assets, but it needs to be data that is compiled into like an Excel table that is machine readable. And when you have that open data, I think the benefits are threefold. Firstly, it means that active citizens can access this information and detect corruption more easily. Secondly, is you don't even need people. You can use technology and AI to analyze these problems and signal whenever we see anomalies in the number that may indicate a risk of corruption. Or thirdly, I feel that simply announcing this policy will already deter a lot of people who are thinking about committing corruption because they know that the chance of them being caught are much higher. So that's what I mean by an economics approach. You reduce the benefit of corruption and you increase the cost of corruption. And that I think is an effective way to design a system that prevents corruption rather than using just the ethical lens of educating and hoping that people by themselves refrain from committing corruption.
Do you ever feel scared that you're gonna touch the flame?
I don't feel I have the right to be scared because I have made a voluntary decision to enter into the field of politics. And my responsibility, as the title of my position says, is a member of the people. Right? So in that sense, I need to do everything I can to speak up for the people and to solve the issues that are affecting the people. So in that sense, I need to press ahead with whatever changes that I feel will be to the benefit of people. I don't think I have a right to be scared.
But I mean, some people have disappeared. It's not just about going to jail, but about your own personal safety. Because right now, for example, there's a police scandal. There's a large police corruption scandal, and there's a lot of people tied to it, and it seems to be a safety issue. But these things don't faze you.
We want a society where people can stand up and speak up without having to be afraid. When I said I don't feel that I have a right to be scared, it does not mean that I dismiss the severity of this issue. I understand that right now a lot of people feel that if they speak up, they may not be safe, and that is a serious issue. But if we as a politician, if myself as a politician chooses to not do anything about it, then that society, that climate of fear will continue. So given that I've been elected into office, I need to use that office for the good of the people. And therefore, if there are certain things that a certain member of the public will feel that he or she does not dare to speak up, I need to speak up for him or for her to make sure that his or her voice is not unheard. But it's interesting you mentioned about the police issue, because I think the depth of information we're getting from that event stems from the fact that the people that are exposing information are from the police themselves. And one policy that we are trying to introduce is what we call leniency agreement. So it's a policy to say that if, let's say, two people commit corruption together, if one of those two people report information to the authorities first, we may provide leniency for that person. Now, of course, people will say, but isn't that bad that you're forgiving someone who committed corruption? Well, we will tell them that if this law is in place in the first place, then it will be very hard for two people to commit corruption together. Because let's say if me and you were to commit something bad, I will always be very paranoid that you will go to the police first, and vice versa. So that is a mechanism that we want to introduce to make sure that people within the same organization, if they were to think about committing corruption together, they will be very paranoid of each other, and therefore no corruption will happen.
Thailand depends on tourism, which is currently in sharp decline. Why is that?
I think there are three things that we need to do better in tourism. The first one is that we need to make sure tourists stay in Thailand longer and spend more each day. So the issue, I think, is not just the quantity, but the amount of spending per tourist that visits Thailand. The second is how do we make sure that tourists, when they come to Thailand, they go to many different provinces. Because right now, I think the income we get from foreign tourists are concentrated in 4 or 5 big provinces in Thailand. And the third is how do you make sure that the income from the tourism sector is spread out fairly and evenly to local service providers. In terms of how to solve that issue, I think the key mechanism that our party focuses on is on decentralization. Because if we want to get tourists to go into other provinces or slightly less popular provinces, we need to make sure that local governments in those areas have the full flexibility in terms of improving their location and their province as a tourist destination. Firstly, right now you will notice that if a local government that's elected by the people within the area want to organize a certain event to attract tourists, let's say a running event in the city, if that involves a lot of the areas that belong to the departments under the central government, then they have to go through a very cumbersome process of asking for permission to use those areas or those premises. How do we decentralize decision-making power to local governments more to make sure that they can improve tourism events and destinations in their local area without having to wait for the central government? Secondly, it's not just about improving the destination, but also improving the infrastructure that supports tourism. One very important supporting infrastructure is public transport. But you will notice that if you go outside Bangkok, it's very hard to find a province that has a good public transport coverage. And part of that is because local governments right now cannot decide for themselves or does not have the power to decide for themselves what type of bus routes or public transport routes they want to have in their own province. That decision is right now given to the central government in the Ministry of Transport. So that is another area that we need to decentralize decision-making power on. And of course, finally, I think local governments who will know how to make the best use of their province for tourism purposes, right now have very limited budget. When a Thai citizen pays 100 baht in tax, 80 baht is sent to the central government. Only 20 baht is spread between local governments across 70 plus provinces. This is very different from a situation you see in Japan, where if a Japanese person paid 100 yen in tax, I believe the split is almost 50-50 between national and local government. So we believe that if we can push our agenda on decentralization, that will help fix the tourism sector, because it will mean that the currently less popular provinces become more popular, and hopefully we can drive tourists towards those provinces more, and therefore they spend their time in Thailand more, and they spend more each day.
You've said before that change starts in the classroom, and you've been critical of Thailand's national core curriculum, which you've said is outdated. People raise Thailand's public education system as an issue of current and future concern. What needs to be fixed?
I think the education system, in a nutshell, needs to be more efficient. Right now, or in the past, the country has put a lot of input into education, but we're not seeing the output that we should be seeing. For example, the Ministry of Education is a ministry that gets one of the highest budget allocations each year. But right now, education is still not free for the Thai people. Even though the policy is named free education for 15 years, we still see parents having to pay about 2,000 to 6,000 baht per year out of their own pocket for certain education-related expenses. Secondly, we see that Thai students invest so much time in education. I think we have one of the longest compulsory learning hours in the classroom compared to other countries in the world. But their diligence and their investment of their time is not being translated into skills which they can compete with the rest of the world. Our PISA scores that measures our reading, math, science proficiency is declining. The skills of our working age population is also in trouble as well. Teachers are also working very hard, but right now about 30 or 40% of their time is being used on administrative tasks that are not related to teaching or the learning of their students. So I think in a nutshell, we need to have a more efficient education system. And one of that is the redesign of a new curriculum. Believe it or not, the current national curriculum that we are currently using has not been revised or renewed in a major way since the first iPhone came out.
2008, right?
Yes, correct. So it means that we are equipping our future generations with a curriculum that was designed way back in the past. And I don't think that's fit for purpose. And if I can elaborate, everyone knows this issue. I'm not the first person to speak up of the need for a new curriculum. But actually, the underlying reasons why a new curriculum has not happened is a microcosm of a bigger issue in Thailand as to why change has not happened. I give you 3 reasons. The first is we have not had a new curriculum because we have a civil service system that is quite resistant to change. So when new ideas are introduced, sometimes it's quite hard to get the buy-in of a civil service system that is incentivized to not change. So we have quite a rigid civil service system. The second reason why a new curriculum has not happened, allegedly, is because of private sector interests interfering. There was a report a few years ago that mentioned that the latest effort to have a new curriculum under the Prayut government after the 2019 election is because there was an infiltration by certain book publishers who were not ready for new curriculum, and therefore they convinced the government to not press ahead with it. And the third and final reason is a lack of political will. I think over the past 20 years, I counted almost 20 education ministers. So it means that the Ministry of Education or the education agenda is not being prioritized by our politicians. That's why I think for the People's Party, we are prioritizing investing in education. I think we need to have a clear agenda as to what we would do if we were to get into government. Ever since the last election, we made it clear that if we were to be in government, we will have a new curriculum done within 1 year. And I think that's a political will that we have not seen committed by other governments and other parties in the past.
Your party continues to fight for the liberalization of alcohol, which is one of the deadliest drugs in the world. Why?
In the past, our priority has been demonopolizing the liquor industry, because I think regardless of which sector, what we believe would be to the benefit of the economy and consumers is to make sure there's free and fair competition. The liquor industry in Thailand is one that is heavily monopolized, and part of that is not an accident, but it's, part of that is because of a law, or rather most of that is because of a law that means that is preventing new entrants from entering that space. So one of our flagship policies that we managed to get bipartisan agreement and get a law passed during this parliament is to demonopolize the liquor industry. Our priority regarding that industry is more on demonopolization. But if you look beyond that, what we had achieved on that law is to try and demonopolize from a production angle. So by getting or by adjusting the minimum production capacity and reducing that barrier to entry, it allows for smaller scale producers to compete in this space. But we still see other types of barriers to entry or barriers in competition as well.
Do you see the issue that I'm presenting though, being that when you have more production, you have more consumption?
Okay, sure. Our priority in the past has been demonopolization. And I think that is a principle that we stand by regardless of which industry. Now to your question, because we have demonopolized and increased competition, I think what I understand is you may be concerned that that would lead to increased consumption.
It does.
Right, yeah. So I think for us, we are trying to balance two things. One is we are a party that believes in individual liberties. So in that sense, we feel that each person has a right to choose for him or herself in terms of how he or she should live his or her life. But on the other hand, we have to minimize social harm. And I think our stance on different issues, including this one, is to balance both. So on the one hand, you may see our party call for the removal of the current law that says alcohol cannot be sold in certain times of the day or certain days of the year. Because we feel that if we stick to our principle of civil liberties, then each person should have the right to choose which time of the day or which day of the year to consume alcohol or not. But that does not prevent us from tackling down on minimizing social harm. For example, making drunk driving or laws against drunk driving more stringent and more enforceable. So I think that's the balance that we are trying to get. To on the one hand, respect civil liberties on this, but also take a stronger crackdown on any risk that may lead to social harm out of drinking.
Is that really possible though? I mean, public health data does not support this becoming better for just for the purpose of like making it so that everyone has the equal right to choose to drink whenever they want. When people can drink during the day, they drink during the day. And oftentimes, as we can see from drunk driving data, from daily news of tourists being drunk in public, these types of things, I'm just really curious, what is your plan to actually do that?
Sure. I mean, I appreciate that the balance is not easy to find, but I believe the two things that I explicitly mentioned just earlier do not contradict each other. I believe that on the one hand, amending laws to respect civil liberties in terms of the time of day that he or she can drink, while in parallel increasing the severity of the penalty and increasing the effective enforcement of measures against drunk driving can go hand in hand. They do not contradict each other. But I think to look on a bigger space, I think what we also want to have is a healthy society, because that's to the benefit of both the economy, benefit of each person's health, as well as it will make sure that the healthcare expenses of the country does not increase exponentially. So I think measures to incentivize people to look after their own health need to be considered as well. And I think if those are effective, then each individual person will be more incentivized to look after his or her health, which may also include not drinking above the health recommendation limit.
If what you're doing is protecting personal liberty to do as you wish, but doing so while also increasing law enforcement, is that really, does that go hand in hand?
I think it goes hand in hand because we're increasing civil liberties, but civil liberties are confined whenever they lead to social harm. And what we are doing is increasing the severity of the penalty and the enforcement mechanism whenever there's a risk that a person's individual decision on drinking leads to social harm. Drunk driving is a clear case. If a person were to drink in his or her own house and does not, go out and drunk drive, then it doesn't lead to the risk and the safety of other people. But whenever he or she drinks above a certain limit and decides to go out to drive, then that's when there's a risk to social harm. And that's when the state needs to step in to make sure that we prevent that from happening.
Why should voters choose the People's Party in the upcoming election?
Ever since the last election, we have been very clear on our platform, which is a platform of change. We noticed that a lot of the issues that we are facing right now are not issues that are necessarily new, but are issues that stem from chronic problems that have not been solved in the past. Whether an economy that is not competitive, an education system that is outdated, corruption that is pervasive, inequality that is widening. Our platform for change that since the last election has been well received by a certain section of the voters, that these radical structural changes are what is needed to solve the radical problems that this country is facing. Our challenge this time round is how do we convince people who were still on the fence last time round that not only do we have the right ideas, but we also know how to execute them. And we have the right people to execute them. So I think what you can expect from us in this upcoming general election is an attempt to go deeper in our policy platform from the last election and dive into the execution plan and the personnel that will come in to drive these policies to give people more confidence that not only do we have the right ideas, but we have the right capabilities, people, and plan to execute and deliver as well.
Okay, and so I ask everybody this question, but is there anything that we've talked about, or is there anything that you think that there's something that people need to know like right now?
I think the most important thing that I want to communicate to the Thai public is to not lose hope. To not lose hope that a vote at the ballot box can really change this country. I know that we've had, 2 elections since the constitution. And as I mentioned, the party that came first has never been in government. Since the 2023 election, we've had 3 prime ministers, 2 removed by the Constitutional Court. So I completely empathize when the people feel that even though they make the efforts to go out and vote, it doesn't seem like their votes are respected. But I still want to reiterate that if you are not satisfied with that problem, the solution is not to stay at home, but to come out and vote more, to convince more people to vote for change. And we want to offer ourselves as one choice in delivering that change. So regardless of whether you believe in us or not, vote for us or not, please come out and vote, and please convince people to come out and vote. And I still believe that the ballot box is a mechanism that can change this country.
Okay, well, Mr. Spokesperson, that is my interview. Thank you so much for your time.